about additional tools. Our objective is that you will learn some of the traditional communication channels that you already know and are familiar with, but you'll learn them in the context of the workplace, and also in particular the positives and the challenges for using each. And this is really the goal. And then you'll learn also best practices for communicating, for using these channels. So you're going to learn what traditional communication channels are in the context of the workplace, the positives and challenges, and then best practices for using them. So in communications or in communication studies, there is a field known as strategic communication. And they are focused probably a lot on persuasion and getting people to connecting with the way that people think so that they can get them to see and do what it is that they want, which is buy a product or service, et cetera, or communicate certain issues, perhaps like now in government, things with the vaccine, et cetera, all that's happening. But there's also strategy in terms of the type of communication channel that you use. And those are, and selecting a channel is based off of two concepts. One is called richness, right? And it has two considerations. It has the level of immediacy and the number of cues available, okay? So as you can see, immediacy is right up under it. Richness and immediacy are the two issues, right, when selecting a channel. You need to think about the richness, meaning the level of immediacy and the number of cues available, and I'm going to say more about that. And then specifically, immediacy is how quickly someone can respond and give feedback. So for example, when we were face-to-face in our school and in other areas of our lives, being face-to-face is the quickest in terms of immediacy. You can tell by someone's reaction or response, meaning you can ask a question and you can, whether they say something or not, there's an immediate response, right? Even if they intentionally seem to delay it, you know that they are intentionally delaying it, right? The other part has to do with the number of cues available, meaning when you're face to face with someone, not only is their ability to respond to you immediate or as immediate as it can get, but then you have the ability to read a number of different cues, nonverbal cues, such as their facial expressions or their body. And those things become, as we get into more mediated communication, so communication that is taking place via computer or a tablet or a cell phone, the level of immediacy drops, right? So think about it, face to face, it's immediate. You can see, right? You can read their face or their body in addition to hearing their answer. When you're on a phone, right? And I'm not talking about FaceTime, I'm just saying if you're on a phone, just voice to voice, you still have some immediacy there, but you don't get the visual, right? You just get the voice, the audible. And that can sometimes be misunderstood or misinterpreted. So can face-to-face, but you have a lot more opportunity during face-to-face to clear it up right then and there. When you have voice to voice, for example, on the phone, you have to do a little bit more work, although there's still some level of immediacy. But then perhaps you're doing video. If you have a tech delay, there's a delay in the response. And so the understanding and the reading of the cues is not as immediate and not always clear. Okay. So when you are in a business context, you want to think about the channel for which you are going to send your communication. You want to think about the richness, meaning how quickly are people able to respond, and what cues will they be able to utilize to assess or understand what is happening. And then, of course, the concept of immediacy, which is built into the richness, is just about how quickly someone can respond. Okay? So the farther away you move from face to face, immediacy drops, right? And richness drops. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. There's some other concepts, of course, that are important. Not just richness and immediacy, but also control, right? And so control has to do with the planning. I mean, not, well, yeah, it does have to do with the planning. Planned, preparation, recording, having it delivered in a particular way. The control allows for time to develop the message that you want to send. So if we go back to my famous iPhone example, when they're rolling out the next iPhone, or the next, I don't know, pair of sneakers, or the artist is about to drop the next album, they are planning, right, what song is going to be the release, right? Or they're planning what apps are going to be put in on advertisements to show the updates and the things that are doing really well, or the new and improved ... whatever you want to say. So they're looking at all the best aspects of it, and they're really crafting a message, because how they craft that message for them translates into dollars earned. So control is huge when it comes to selecting a communication channel. Now, it doesn't mean that you always have to have control, but some control is necessary. Planning, of course, which is related to control, but planning is talking specifically about the message, about it being drafted, edited, and revised and rehearsed. Specifically, the content of the message. So control talks about the message from beginning to end, the extent to which it can be planned, and then recorded, and then released. And then the planning in particular is really talking about the development of the message itself, from draft to all of the development that needs to happen right before its delivery. And then, of course, permanence has to, and this is something that you all need to be extremely aware of, especially in this day and age and time, and probably for the rest of your lives. The extent to which people are able to retrieve, they can save, store, and retrieve that message, right? That's what's getting a lot of stars into trouble now, right? We've gone into what they call cancel culture, right? We hear that so-and-so made a comment about such and such, and it's just like, oh my God. I don't know if any of you know who Kirk Franklin is, but apparently him and his son had some issue, and the son put it on YouTube, and there was all this flutter around it. And again, it's the idea that nowadays people can take your, whether you intentionally, whether you're being recorded or not, they can take it and use that. And so you do need to be aware of that. But when you're selecting a channel for communication, you want to consider whether or not it is going to be able to be permanent. In a business context, you do want it to be permanent, right? To a certain degree. You want it to be able to be saved, stored, retrieved, and distributed to others. Unless, of course, there's an error, and then, of course, you don't. But generally speaking, you would want some level of permanence in your communications. Then there are these constraints, right? Constraints, and we'll talk more about that in depth as we go in. But these just deal with the limitations of coordinating and developing a message, and then also the resources. So it's not simply getting online and sending an email, although an email may be the channel that you choose. But sometimes, for example, certain types of campaigns require resources or funding or social media campaigns. They require a social media manager or something like that. And those things require, that's money, right? There's a budget. Marketing is a big time budget. And so the constraints are just, coordinating and does it have to go up 3 levels before it's approved, right? So sometimes, perhaps, I don't know if some of you have an advisor, right? You have to do something, then your advisor has to do something, and then the advisor has to send it to their supervisor, and then something gets approved. Well, the same thing when you're developing messages and selecting channels for communication. Sometimes the constraints, meaning the coordinating of all the people who have to weigh in on a message before it goes out, can be challenging. And that might put a limitation on what can be done or how it is done. And I've already talked about that. And coordination is really just all the relevant people, right? All the relevant people, all the people who have to sign off or put their stamp of approval on something before it is released. And then, of course, resources. Again, I've kind of talked about that. It's finances, it's space, it's time. Space has to do with perhaps the meeting space, right? Or the ability to gather together. Time has to do with coordinating schedules. And we all know how busy we are, even with doing school and doing a large portion of our lives online. We still, time is still tight. So, and there are other investments, right, that might be necessary in order to use certain channels of communication. So these are just all of the things that you need to think about and consider when selecting a channel for communication. So I'm sure you've heard this, especially since the pandemic began. You have probably heard of synchronous communication and asynchronous communication, like you heard of synchronous classes and asynchronous classes. I have a question. Are we currently in synchronous communication and a synchronous class, or are we in an asynchronous class? Somebody.
Synchronous.
Synchronous.
Yes, we are in synchronous, right? It occurs in real time. I ask questions such as I just did in order to get immediate responses. And of course, we have had conversations, lively conversations in this class. But of course, there are classes, and I'm sure that there are even more coming that are asynchronous. I have a class that's a hybrid of this, where we do partially synchronous and they also do asynchronous things. So it does not occur in real time, meaning I can record things and post them and they view them at a time that's most convenient for them. And they do their work within the given time frame, such as I've given you. So individuals involved in such communication can pay attention and respond to the things that they have at the time of their choosing. They usually still have some type of boundaries, right? There's usually a time frame that they're working in, but they don't have to do it at 8 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock in the morning. If they wanted to get up in the middle of the night at 12 a.m. and work, they could do that, right? And that's something, believe it or not, that has become popular since the pandemic and will probably remain something that's extremely, that's something that will remain viable. So creating effective emails. Email communication is the primary form of written business communication. And such, you do have an exercise on it for this week. Most analysts expect it to be the primary tool for at least the next 5 to 10 years in most companies. And it will be, it is and will be. And so writing effective emails and communicating effectively through email is important. And so even now, from this moment on, the emails that you send, whether they be to me or any of your other professors or in your personal life to colleagues or supervisors or things like that, you need to take a moment before you hit send and think about how this represents you, okay? Because since it is the primary form of written business communication, that means people analyze it like as if you were standing there dressed. Please mute yourself. So let me say that again. Because email is the primary form of written business communication, before you send another email from now on, you need to stop and read it and look at it and see how, or ask yourself, how does this represent me? Or does this adequately represent me? And the reason why I'm saying that is because just like we talked about dress being a form of nonverbal communication and people make decisions about your credibility, right? Based off of how you look and how you show up, the same thing happens via email. Okay, they read your email, and if it's just like, hello, I need X, Y, and Z. Thank you so much. Bye. It's just like, what? And I'm being very facetious right now, but believe it or not, I've gotten emails like that from students. And so I'm saying, hint, hint, from now on, any emails that you send, regardless of what aspect of your life they are for, you want to be very intentional about how it represents you and what does it say about your credibility and what does it say about you as a person. So we're going to talk about principles of effective emails for a few moments. First, you want to use it for the right purposes, especially business. And I'm talking specifically about business email. So make no mistake, I am talking about business email, okay? That means if it is your BMCC email, consider this your job. Consider this your part-time job or your full-time job if you're in school full-time, your part-time hustle. You know, don't use it to solicit or do anything else other than for your business, for the business of getting your degree. Okay, use a separate email for other types of things, but don't use your BMCC email or your actual workplace email for anything other than that. You want to try to ensure ease of reading, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth soon. And I put it next to it, help me help you. When you email someone and you want them to assist you, you want to make it easy for them to help you. So help me help you, help them help you. Make sure that your email is clear, that it's thoughtful, that you are hitting your points, that you are not dragging on. Draft it first if you need to. Show respect for time, and you show your respect for time for quick and concise emails. Let's just take a look. Even though I'm not always sending you emails, I do post announcements. If you notice, I try to keep my announcements very brief and to the point. I try to hit it very clearly and get to the point and move on. Why? Because if I'm clear, if I'm as clear as I can be in my communication, that means you will be able to be clear and you will be able to do the work that you need to do. And that will all save us all time. But you want to definitely do this in the context of emails, especially for business, because people get tired, and if we remember back, I'm not sure if it was module 3 or so, when we see that managers spend, 2 to 3 hours a day on email. So if they're spending all of this time on email, that means their eyes, especially for those of us who have 4, because we wear glasses, their eyes get tired, right? And so, we start to scan, especially because we're spending so much time, even now, on screens. So people start to scan and they start to try to figure out, their eyes scan and try to look for keywords and phrases and bullet points to kind of help them figure out your point. So you show respect for time when your communication is very clear and concise and to the point. And then you want to protect privacy and confidentiality. You don't want to share emails or do forwards, etc., unless it's necessary. And I put that CC at the bottom because back in my day, I don't know if any of y'all remember, or if you're too young to remember, they used to have these, what they call Rexigraphs. But what it was is the old checkbooks. I don't know if anybody's parent, or even if you may have a checkbook that uses this anymore, probably not. But there was this piece of paper and all you had to do was press on it and it would transfer what you had on the top to the bottom. And that's how they used to do receipts. You might find some places and some people who still operate that way, but not very many. And they call that carbon copy. That's what CC stands for. Now, when you see this at the bottom of a letter, it just means that a copy has been sent to whoever's name is listed. Sometimes there can be one name, several names, or if it's left blank, it just means that it has been sent to, it can be sent to anybody. Okay. So these are just some effective, some principles for effective emails. Use it for the right purposes. Ensure ease of reading. Show respect for time. And again, you'll be able to ensure ease of reading and show respect for time in how you write it, right? And then you want to protect privacy and confidentiality. You also want to try to respond promptly, right? 1 to 3 days, okay? In a business context, 1 to 3 days. You want to maintain professionalism and appropriate formality. Do not assume familiarity. Let me write that word. Do not assume familiarity. Okay. Even if you have that relationship with the person face to face, when you're communicating in a business context in writing, always be professional, because that will help them and you. Okay. Manage emotion effectively. I'm guilty of it too. Sometimes people can make you upset, but you want to be mindful about how you respond, especially in written form. Because remember, people can send and save your message and retrieve it at the most inopportune time. And it doesn't mean that you don't have a right to be upset, but you just want to be very clear about what you're doing when you put anything in writing. Okay. Avoid distractions. And this is just generally speaking when you're trying to craft a statement or say something in writing. We're so used to multitasking, so we do it probably without thinking. But if we can avoid distractions, that way we can ensure fewer mistakes when writing. Also, to recognize triggers and when someone is attempting to goad you into an argument. Sometimes people will respond in writing to you, and the intent, the motive, is to get you to overreact, or not overreact, but to get upset and to respond. And they want you to respond in anger. And so you need to be mindful of that. And when that happens, before you hit send, take a moment to cool. Let cooler heads prevail, and just take a moment, walk away. If there's something that's like, not letting you hit that send button, don't hit the send button. Walk away, go get some air, go for a brisk walk, a quick walk, go downstairs, or wherever you are, just go change your surroundings for a few moments, and then come back and look at it and see if you feel the same way. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't be upset, but you just want to be very clear about how you communicate, especially when you are triggered in writing. So we already talked about using email for the right purposes. I'll point out a few things that I think are important for us to know, important for you to know. It is low cost and little coordination, right? So in that way, there are few constraints, high control. Okay. So email has few constraints, high control. The few constraints are the low cost and the little coordination. The high control is that the writer can think them out carefully and provide a permanent record, right? You don't have to hit the send button until you are ready to send. Okay. Something else that's extremely important. Email is not the place to deal with sensitive or emotional things. Okay, it really is not. It is not effective for that, because sometimes tone and other types of things don't come through as clearly, especially depending upon the person's savvy with the English language. So we have to be mindful of that. So with email and with written communication, you really want to deal in the business context, you want to deal with facts. You want to deal with things that can't be debated or argued, because email does not really lend itself to that very well. It is also inefficient for facilitating discussions, which is basically what I was saying in the last point I made. Like I said, in terms of ensuring ease of reading, you need to make sure that subject line is descriptive. Your message needs to be brief yet complete. You need to have a call to action. What do you want people to do after they finish reading your email? And you want to include a signature block. So that you'll see we'll look at the anatomy of an email in a second, and then use attachments wisely. Don't send somebody 50 attachments. Okay. Yeah. Do not send someone 50 attachments. Don't send them 10 unless it is something that is pressing. You just want to be mindful of, that, because again, you start messing with the security of the document and the integrity of the document and all that stuff like that. So just, use attachments wisely. Oh, sorry. So I was getting a little bit ahead of myself. This is the module where we talk about how much time business professionals spend doing email. Okay. So as you can see, the circle shows that 2 to 5 hours per week. Okay. 2 to 5 hours per week. Well, no, it's per day. Is it per day? Yes, 2 to 5 hours. Okay, yeah. Okay. 2 to 5 hours. So 30%, right? 30%, 8 hours. So, okay, that's, I'm sorry, I was looking back at my math. So basically, if you work 4 or 5 days a week, right? 2 hours per day, that's 8 hours. That's almost one full working day that you spend on just email if you add that up. Okay. And so that's sort of what I was getting at. And you can see that sort of right here. So an 8-hour workday, right? A third of that is this right here. And you know, if you've worked at all, you know, you get to work, kind of got to get warmed up, especially if you're not already warmed up when you get there. And if you work in an office, or even if you've worked in the restaurant industry, you know, time can sometimes go by quick. And so to sit down and to spend 2 hours or 2 to 3 hours on just one particular task, it's like I got dressed, came all the way here, and I don't feel like I did much at all. Right? So it just shows you the amount of time. So 2 to 3 hours a day, that's 15 or so hours a week. That's a lot of time. Okay. And that's a lot of time to be reading, you know, email. So here we're going to just look very quickly at the anatomy of a less effective email. I'm just going to highlight some things. Here it is. This is in your book. Agreement, right? That's a non-descriptive subject line. We know what we do when we go into our email inboxes. We start scanning, and the titles of those emails will prompt us oftentimes to open, right? Or not open, okay? And then attached is a non-descriptive subject name. And then look at the use of space here. I can tell you, for me, as somebody who wears glasses, this makes my eyes glaze over. No paragraph, no separation, everything is just bunched in together. Horrible. Okay. And then if you look at the signature block, it's an unhelpful signature block. Why? Because nothing in here in this area gives us any clue as to who this person is. And then it's an unprofessional tagline: when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Right? It's horrible. You can go look at this more in depth, but this is not what you want to do.
Professor, I have a question regarding this email. So
yes.
the main mistake here is that the message is not brief and concise, right?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
We're looking at structure right now. We're looking at just the setup of the email.
Okay.
So I just finished pointing out the non-descriptive subject line. That's this. Mm-hmm. We could have five emails come in that talk about agreement. How would we know that it's specifically related to this individual or what it's related to unless we opened it? So when you go into your email, I'm sorry?
Yeah, you need to put your name in parentheses just in case.
Well, it's not just your name. It's making the subject clear so that when you or I go in to scan our email inbox, right, we can see what the issue is or what the topic is, because we know that oftentimes too, that will determine whether or not we even open the email in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we don't even get to the content of the message. We're just talking about its overall arrangement. right? We're just looking at the overall arrangement of it. But here goes an arrangement of a more effective email, and I'm gonna just try to zoom in just a little bit. So again, I'm gonna tick off a few things and maybe I'll use a different color. Here's your 2. Oh, that's why I don't like using that color. Let me see if I can find another one. Okay, let's try using this one. There is the, okay. Here's the 2, right? You have who it's to, but then look, you've got your subject. Clear, detailed subject line. Revised terms of sponsorship for the financial literacy fair. We all get perhaps hundreds, if not thousands of emails on a regular basis. When we scan subject lines, it is helpful to see something spelled out because that will help us open it and we won't miss it, right? Attached. The attachment makes sense. Sunrise sponsorship terms proposal. So the attachment matches the subject to some degree, and that helps for the person who's receiving this email. Says it's a pleasant opening. It says hi, right? And then even if the person didn't read this, they'd know the sponsorship fee, they know about the logo, they know about the booth size, and they know that they were responsible for bringing their own equipment and that they could rent a projector. So even if they skip this part right here, they'd still be able to get all that they needed because it's numbered. And what does it say over here? Numbered format leads to rapid processing of information. It's like bullets. It's, this is it, this is it, this is it. You know, you ever heard the expression, hit it and quit it? This is hitting it and quitting it. You can see it, you know what it is, and you can move on. There's a closing. And then he ends, it's a complete professional signature line because at this point, everything is clear. All these things here, please go to your text and read them. But this looks very different from this. Here, the person would probably have to sit and literally read it all before they got all of the information that they got right here. And it didn't take us long to be able to get that information. So structure matters. Structure, arrangement matters. That structure and arrangement helps you to show respect for others' time, right? You don't need to send emails to everybody in the department if only 2 or 3 people are handling the situation. You want to provide timelines and options. You want to be very careful not to overuse that priority flag, but you might want to consider putting in your subject line, time sensitive, right? I don't know if you've ever heard of the story about the boy that cried wolf, right? If every email that comes from you is priority, the person is going to stop reading your email, okay? Because they're going to say everything from you is not a priority. It's not. You might feel like it is, but it's not. So you want to be very careful about using the priority flag. I don't think everybody is every email, every company that offers email gives you the ability to have a priority flag, but I know Microsoft does, I believe. I don't know if Gmail does. If it does, I haven't used it in a very long time. You want to let others know when you will take longer than anticipated to respond or take action. So sometimes you will receive email and you will need to take action on it, or their expectation is you're going to do something, you, in your response, you need to let the people know how long it is going to take you to do whatever it is that you need to do. Okay. They may not ask you directly, but implicitly, that's basically what they're hoping or assuming you're going to give them. A timeline about when you're going to deal with certain things, handle certain things, complete certain things. Avoid contributing to confusing and repetitive email chains. Nobody has time for, send to 100 people if you believe that, tomorrow you're going to win $1 million. Like, I mean, nobody has time for that. So you don't need to hit a reply and say amen. So 500 people see you say amen. Like I said, I'm being very facetious, taking something from my own, pulling something from my own life as an example, just to try to get you to understand that, even when people send those kinds of emails, or perhaps people are responding, you don't add to it. Somebody will say, can somebody take me off this list? And you don't need to do that either. You just, you should be able to spot it after a while, and just not open them. This is something that's also very important for you to note and to consider and think about as you move on and as you continue on in life. When you greet someone with their name, you greet someone and you say their name, you increase the likelihood, you increase morale and the likelihood of them of emails. When you just greet them only, but you don't use their name, look at the difference. You went from 53% of emails to 5. Okay. And it shows you the morale, high morale organization. So as a manager, as leaders in your field, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, when you send emails out to your employees or those who you manage, you want to greet them, and you also want to use their name. It humanizes them, just like it humanizes you. Okay? When someone does that for you. When you don't greet them at all, it's the lack of morale increases. Okay.
So that way you build the confidence, right? When you write the name in your email, right?
You're gonna say hello, Ilya, or hello, Jalen, or hello, Tyler, right? It increases the morale. They did a study. I don't know all the ins and outs of the study, but they did this study and they looked at, the use of email greetings and names and what that did for the people. And it increased their morale when you greet people and also say their name.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And there goes the data. I mean, here goes the citation. So I'm sure you could actually go and pull up the study. I've never had people read the study, but that might be worth doing. Something for me to think about. Maintain professionalism and appropriate formality. So again, I've mentioned this already, but here it is again, just being a little bit more detail. Avoid indications that you view email as casual communication. It's not water cooler conversation in writing, okay? So email, especially in the business context, is for business. and should not be approached casually at all. Apply the same standards of spelling, punctuation, and formatting you would for other written documents. Hint, hint, don't think that just because it's email that you get to be lax. You don't. You should not. You need to think of email as still standard written communication in the same way that you would take care in writing a paper. Your spelling and your punctuation and your formatting, all of those things still need to hold, right? Even with email. So just like you would do that for a paper, you still need to do that for email. And of course, we've just saw the importance of greetings and names. Neutrality effect. I'm trying to think if I have this already. So I talked to you about managing emotion and maintaining civility. So the neutrality effect is recipients are more likely to perceive messages with an intended positive emotion as neutral, which is good. You want that. Versus the negativity effect, where recipients are more likely to perceive messages that are intended as neutral as negative. Okay, so what we want, or what we're going for, is that you want intended positive emails, so that way they will be kind of understood or interpreted in a neutral manner, versus trying to write in a neutral way, because oftentimes that will trigger negativity. This one is a little, it's a funky concept. It's not as in depth, so don't overly stress upon it, because I probably will not, I don't think I will be testing you on that at all. So this chapter, I think, also has some great charts in it, so you should check them out for sure. Flames, these are emails or other digital communications that, basically trying to start something, right? They're intentionally trying to stoke the flames, trying to instigate situations through the use of profanity, obscenity, and any insults, right, that inflict harm to a person or an organization. And we all heard of silence, but we know too that there is cyber silence. And this, of course, is just when people don't respond to email and other communications. And that's not good either, because then people are left to their own thoughts, and they may think things that you don't want them to think. So you want to be mindful. That's why we say we try to respond to people within a few days in certain types of business contexts, because we want to make sure that people don't think that we're just not responding. Of course, cyber, you've heard of cyberbullying or cyber incivility. And this is, of course, it's a violation of respect and consideration in an online environment based on workplace norms. So whatever the workplace norms are, when someone lacks civility, even online, they are basically being disrespectful. And it can be active or passive, meaning someone could be very intentionally disrespectful or uncivil to someone, or it can be sort of a passive aggressive type of incivility. So this chart, I'm not going to spend over amount of time. I'm just going to point out two things. These charts show you the type of emails. One top chart shows active email incivility and passive email incivility. So I'm just going to highlight used emails to say negative things about you that he or she wouldn't say to you face to face. 58% of people surveyed said that that was the case of active email incivility. So people basically spoke and said things to someone via email in writing, things that they would not have said to a person face to face. So they used the email or the opportunity to email as a way to say the things that they would not have said in person. And of course, passive email incivility, basically emails used for discussions that would require face-to-face dialogue. So there are times in which emails do not suffice and should not suffice. And in these passive email incivility situations, people used email when they should have had face-to-face conversation, when there should have been some type of dialogue. These people chose to use email. And in doing that, it was a passive, they again, used it in a way that really was not what it was not meant for. What was needed was conversation between the parties. So sometimes we need to reinterpret, right? Or make an adjustment of our perceptions, and try to look at things from another person's point of view. That does not necessarily mean, and I am not saying that means to ignore anything that is abusive or that is blatantly disrespectful. I'm just saying that sometimes we may need to take a step back and make an adjustment and try to see whether or not we are in our feelings at the moment. And is it the other person or is it us? The other thing too is that, relaxing or doing some mindfulness, meditation or things like that on a regular basis can also help you too from becoming angry and frustrated over things, situations, and people that really shouldn't take your energy like that, right? Some people aren't worth your energy. Some situations are not worth your energy. And, being in a state, being mindful can help us assess whether or not certain situations and people deserve our energy. For example, I had a situation where I emailed a company and I had a situation and they responded, but they told me that, oh yes, when we sent something and it was something that was supposed to come to my phone. And I just thought, the bottom line is I wanted to respond back, but I said at this point, it doesn't make any sense. They're going to handle what I need them to handle. And while I felt the person was being passive aggressive, I just said, let me just let it go. What I can do is utilize the monies that I have left there, and then I don't have to return. I won't use that space anymore. I wanted to dig in and make my point. But I just thought, at what cost, and does it deserve my energy in this way? So of course, along with relaxation, you want to diffuse, avoid escalating and removing tension so that you can get your work objectives done. Sometimes some people you just have to give them a pass. It doesn't mean they get a whole bunch of passes. But you might need to give some people a pass or two. And perhaps people will also extend grace to you and give you a pass or two, so that you can accomplish the objectives, the work objectives that you have. So I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on this angry email because you all can do that for yourselves. That is figure 7.6. Please read this. I mean, I'm sure people have written it and seen it. So the diffusing of angry emails is, this is good, figure 7.7. And you can see in green. If we had more time, I would read through some of this, but that's something that you can do on your own. Just want to double check one thing because I see time is one. Oh God. Okay, good. All right, we're almost done. So I'm going to try to speed up just a tad bit. So instant messaging, you know what that is. In all honesty, anybody use instant messaging in the workplace? And by that, I mean your company uses it, not meaning you use it to talk to your coworkers when you're supposed to be working.
No.
Okay. So yeah, it's not used by companies really. I mean, some companies use it, but
Excuse, I have a question.
yes.
My job has like, it's not a walkie-talkie, but it's like a pager that they gave all of us. Does that count? And we just call each other by name on it.
Right. So that would be, yes, that would be along those lines, right? That's a little bit different because you're not sitting and typing, where I think in this instance, Cardone was thinking about, how people, again, I might be dating myself, but back in the day, the first kind of instant messaging people had was through AOL, right? And people would sit and talk, back and forth and chat. But the walkie-talkies, that's a good one, and they ping each other, right? And so yes, those would be similar, the same idea. And so yes, that's like instant messaging because you can talk directly to them. But I'm sure you all know that those conversations could be monitored. So y'all not gonna sit up there and have, a coffee clutch there. You're not gonna, get a couple of beers and talk, shop over those devices, right? And so that's really the idea. Very few places use instant messaging as a form of regular communication. So that's a place in which Cardone probably is a little bit dated. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. So let me just go and move through that. Where do I want to? Okay, so this is where I want to talk about managing your digital communication. So you want to check your digital messages or your email several times a day. He says 4 to 5 times. You just want to be mindful that it's, y'all are born with these things at your hip. I'm not. So I can put my phone down and like literally don't even check for it for the rest of the day. I only check because I have children. So just be mindful that your mobile device is really a device and not an appendage. And develop strategies to manage your email inbox. I know I have an enormous amount of email that I constantly have to go through. I have several email addresses. Turn off message alerts. And this just helps to keep your sanity and to not feel overwhelmed. Use rich channels such as face-to-face and phone conversations to accomplish a task completely. For example, I'm going to be working on a newsletter, with another parent at my kid's school. And she sent an email and I just said, can I call you? Because email is fine, but because we need to work together, it just made sense for us to be able to talk to each other on the phone or even do a video call. It just made more sense to be like that. And that's much more rich because then we could actually have a conversation instead of back and forth via email. And especially we don't know each other. So it's an opportunity for us to get to know each other as well as accomplish a particular task. Reply as quickly as you can. Immediately is not always possible. I know I'm somebody that sometimes I need a minute to think about how I need to respond, but reply quickly as possible to messages because some messages are urgent. Avoid unnecessarily lengthening an email chain. Don't add to the forwards. Use automatic messages to help people know when you're not going to be there. Use schedules and plan for your phone calls. I actually schedule those things into my, particularly during my day. Unless they're in the car, I usually schedule them, you know, if it's not a phone call that I take in the car, then it's scheduled in my planner. Ensure quality audio. Open with a warm greeting. Use your caller's name. You know, how are you? You know, how's your day going? You know, and then, you know, deal with the issue at hand. You know, they call it small talk. Have a little small talk. And then, you know, get into the issues that you need to deal with. Try to be pleasant and kind. And you'll find that you get a lot farther with people and get more things accomplished when you do this versus when you don't. You know, share airtime, share the microphone. Don't dominate the conversation. Don't dominate the meeting. Don't dominate the time. Remember to listen and avoid multitasking. And I know that that's hard because being in this pandemic, we have been asked to multitask. And so we have to be intentional to make a stand and not multitask when it comes to certain things. Take notes on important points so that you can remember and also know what needs to be done moving forward and be able to remind yourself about what you talked about the last time. Thank the person. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for calling me back. Thank you so much for you know, creating some space for us to chat and talk about this. And then, you know, so from now you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to do ABC. Okay, awesome. Great. Thanks so much. Take good care. Bye. And it makes it so much more pleasant the next time you get on the phone. Okay. And that's just me kind of just demonstrating in the moment. So this is one of the last things I'll show you. And that is, you know, being on the phone. So remember, people spend at least 2 hours a day on email. How many times do they spend on the phone? About the same amount, close to the same amount, an hour to 2 hours a day, right? So that's 4 hours. That's half the workday on just phone, on just email and phone communication. Okay.
That's too much.
Yeah, it's a lot. Exactly. Exactly. It is a lot. And so that's one of the reasons why we have to make sure that we are mindful of our own disposition, so that way too we don't trigger and cause other people to be, you know, bothered by the fact that, you know, we may not be in the best possible place. And so these are all the reasons why you want to have a schedule and you want to have a plan of getting up and a routine and some discipline, so that when you engage with people, you can be your best self and people will enjoy engaging with you and conducting business with you, because that person is always together. They always have a smile on their face. They're not always grumpy. And I'm just using some facetious types of characteristics, but those are some of the things that translate into organizational behavior. You know, having your ducks in a row, having your papers, having your notes, things like that. There's some people you want to work with, right? And there are other people you don't. And why is that? Well, it's their disposition, it's their organization, it's all of these things. And the way that they communicate, of course. And all of this adds to your credibility or detracts from it. This is something simple. It's a meeting request. I'm sure you all have seen this at some point. If not, you will. It's in your book. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And I think these are mostly charts. So the last thing, you know, when you're using technology, as I'm sure you've experienced, you know, if you can practice before the group call, do it. Make sure your webcam is used, you're using it effectively, wisely. You know, if you're in charge, take charge. Make sure you're clear because you have a meeting agenda and a plan. Follow the guidelines for effective virtual meetings. So we talked about the trade-offs of richness, control, and constraints with a communication channel. We talked about writing effective emails. We talked about emotion in online communications because they can be misconstrued. Effective instant messaging in the workplace. And thank you for whoever it was that brought up that great example. Although people don't use necessarily instant messaging, there are jobs that use those walkie-talkie type things, and people are able to ping each other, and that is a form of instant messaging. And that was a great example. So thank you for mentioning that. Be mindful of your own digital overload. Okay. Yes, you're here to make money. Yes, you want to be a good business person. Yes, you want to be an effective manager, but you also know you have to take care of yourself and your mind and your health and your spirit. And sometimes, oftentimes, you need to have a regular practice of turning all of this stuff off. Okay. And then just be effective with phone conversations and video conferences. So that's pretty